And joining us now here on Market Talk for a Memorial Day look at the weather, we welcome in our good friend Eric Snodgrass with Nutrien. And Eric, thanks so much for taking the time to join us here today on a holiday. And I hope your holiday weekend's been going good so far. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, it has. It's been a great weekend, and just a reminder that the atmosphere doesn't know that we take holidays, right? So there's always something that's up to, and I thought it was very important that we talk today.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the time, and I know I've been out. I spent a week on the beach, and the atmosphere down there was kind of humid, and a lot of sun, a lot of sand, and now kind of getting back to reality here and getting into the conversation. Walk me through where we've kind of been the last 14 days or so with this weather outlook. Let's start there and just kind of set us up. Where have we been before we talk about where we're going here, Eric?
Yeah, something to make kind of clear here to a lot of folks that listen to meteorologists talk about the weather. There's always this discussion about, all the correlations between things like El Nino or La Nina, or as we often talk about the PDO, the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, or whatever. You could just name any weather phenomena that we talk about. And really what they all discuss, what they all are telling us is the atmosphere going to gain its momentum, or is it going to lose momentum? Is it going to come out of the southwest or the northwest in terms of the jet stream position? Are we going to get flow that gets stuck, or are we going to have flow that's going to move? That's it. That's all we do. To be
Mhm.
honest with you. In fact, I can make it even simpler than that. We basically just look for wherever the pressure increases or decreases. I know that makes my job profession look a lot less important than it is, but honestly, that's the basics of all of it. So you say, where have we been? Well, starting about 2 weeks ago, the flow across North America and in fact, across most of the northern hemisphere lost its momentum. And this map we're looking at here shows us the problem with that. When the atmosphere loses its momentum coming across North America, everywhere that you see in these reds, we just didn't have the wind to transport moisture. We didn't have the wind to create frontal boundaries. We didn't have the wind to get atmosphere to lift and move. So the storms go where the storms like to live. They like to live on the front range of the Rocky Mountains. They like to live in the Southwest. They'd like to live over the Southeast where it's hot and humid, kind of close to where you spent, your honeymoon, right? So
Mhm.
you think about these things, and we just had no flow across the part of the country that we grow a lot of corn and soybeans and other big staple crops. So there's places that have not measured a drop of precip in 2 weeks. Now the only benefit to this during this time period is we did get to finish planting, and it hasn't been hot yet. But as we look out over the next week or so, we just don't see much change in that. So on this map, look, it's going to storm more in the Intermountain West. It's going to storm in Montana. It's going to storm along the front range of the Rockies. We are really working hard to bust a drought in the plains, while we are seeing flash drought. That's a term we often use when it's hot and dry, developing in the midsection of the country. And that heat is coming in later this week. We're going to start to see temperatures in the ice states all the way down the Mississippi River Valley start to touch, that 90 to, low 90s numbers for highs. And that doesn't last long, but the problem is that we haven't had much moisture. And as you can see here, not a lot's coming for those locations. So now all of a sudden the pressure's on. When does it come back? But that's your setup right now.
Well, let's talk about when this comes back because obviously it feels like in the case of the markets too, late last week, putting in a little bit of a weather premium, so to speak, with the dry forecast ahead. So, walk me through here. What are the thoughts? What are we looking at as we roll the calendar to June? Are we going to bring some moisture back to the central part of the country here, Eric? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, my first thought is the markets are always baffling, right? I'd much rather predict the atmosphere than the markets. And the reason I say that is because, we began discussing this dry time period that we're in now, and that we're going to see in the first, few days, or maybe 7 or 8 days of June. We talked about it way before the markets reacted to it. And that's what's kind of odd to me, is that all of a sudden, like, hey, it's Friday, what's going on? I think the talk over that are the weekend model runs going to show a change? And they didn't really. So the open tonight's going to be an interesting thing. But what has
Mhm.
not changed is that we still think that after the first maybe 7, 8, 9 days of June, the pattern's going to start to tighten up again. And what I mean by that is the pressure gradient builds. You start to get better flow and reason to bring in some rain. And the CFSV2, which is not a model that I tend to rely on any individual run, but I tend to look at it a lot when it's stuck on a certain set of outcomes and then it keeps repeating that in the forecast. That's what it's been doing. It's been consistent. And if you look at these two maps, this shows the middle of June toward the end of June with a lot of green in the midsection of the country. And that means that we could start to gain better flow to return better June precip. Now that makes sense coming back to the first thing I told you, which is we are building an El Nino. We are losing the strong Pacific Decadal Oscillation signal. It's becoming much more focused in one spot. And the atmosphere is just likely going to go back into a phase where it just gains some momentum. It's this ebb and flow, right? And this is what I think we're going to see. So it's odd to say this, but this dry stretch, we have them every summer, except for extreme summers like 1993. But we have them every summer. This one just came early, and there was just a lot of folks that said, remember the drought and fall of last year, and here we are saying, gosh, we've got to get this going. And it appears that the atmosphere is going to start to return some moisture, but we'll still talk again next Monday and not have seen it yet.
Yeah. Well, my thought too is with this drought, this dry period coming early, as you said, do we feel like that's going to be better in the long run potentially here for our crop development? I know that's more of an agronomic question, but just what you have heard previously from agronomists and just thoughts from what you hear from farmers. I mean, is it almost better for us to have this now and hopefully pick up some precip, say, as we get into July, August, some of those very critical time periods in development?
Yeah, I asked a lot of experts, and I asked people that work in this area of agronomy and work in this area of understanding crop science, and they generally say, yeah, you get the plant searching for water, it puts down better root structure, but it needs to be able to search and find some water. And
Mhm.
there's some subsurface soil moisture issues in places. So we then start to say, well, if you're thinking about corn specifically, if it gets to that V8 stage where it's really trying to determine some of the characteristics of the ear itself, if it doesn't get that water, then where are we? And there's going to be some of that crop that's going to be at that stage. I'm talking about parts of Missouri down into the lower Mississippi River Valley, that's going to be at those critical stages. Now, not probably in Illinois or Iowa or India, the northern part or the central part of the Corn Belt, certainly not the northern. So the answer is some folks are going to be negatively affected by this. But if you do dump a bunch of water on it later, the crop will return back to its kind of motivation to thrive, I think. I mean, it wants to.
Mhm.
What's a crop want to do? It wants to produce that ear. That's it. It's designed to reproduce. And so the idea here is that hopefully the later rains are going to come through and really start to give us a better chance.
I know you mentioned we're doing a good job trying to bust that drought in the plains. I know it's probably a little too late for that winter wheat crop there, parts of Kansas, Oklahoma. But then also, I know we were very wet in the northern plains that delayed our planting. Any thoughts on just the drought busting we're seeing and or catching up on some of that delayed spring planting across the northern plains here the last week or so, Eric?
Yeah, the drought busting, if I could have dialed that up in March, this would have been incredible. I mean, we
Hmm.
would have just taken that wheat crop to a new level, and it would have been amazing. Instead it came in May, and that's no good. I mean, it's good for the longer term water situation in the West, but it's not good for what we're doing out there. I'll tell you this: there is a big wild card, and that is the northern plains, because I don't know, and I've never had to make this decision, but I don't know what the decision looks like on prevented plant. Remember, we had all the flooding from snowmelt, we had the frosts that were late in that area, and there's been a lot of storms in the north, and there was a bunch of smoke. I mean, there's a lot of things that are pushing farmers back and back and back. And those decisions have to be made. I don't know what the acreage could look like there, but you have to imagine that the way the price has changed so much lately, that those are going to be hard decisions made by those growers on what that acreage is going to look like. We think that after, if you do get a crop established in the northern plains, that this will be a year that I think we'll have good flow, good storms, good heat. We'll get it going, even though
Yep.
it's very late. But yeah, that's where we stand in the northern plains. That's the big question mark.
And real briefly, South America, anything you're watching there as we wrap up the month of May, Eric?
Yeah, rain in southern Brazil. That was key. So some moisture
Mhm.
that came in over the weekend. We're expecting a little bit early this week that could finish off that safrinha crop and make it huge. And that's the main story.
Fantastic. Well, we appreciate the time as always. Folks can sign up for Eric's daily weather newsletter online, info.nutrient.com/Snodgrass_weather. And if you don't remember that, it's on our website as well. With that, Eric Snodgrass of Nutrient, always great to catch up with you, sir. Thanks for joining us this week, and we'll talk to you again next week.
All right, sounds good.